During my last Walkumentary, I took you through the pioneer section of Evergreen Cemetery in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And that's over here. I told you about the approximate 1,400 pioneers that are buried mostly in unmarked graves in this area right here, as you see in the distance. What seems to be an empty field out there is not really empty. As I said, there's probably approximately 1,400 pioneers buried underground there. And many of them are in unmarked graves. Most of them are unmarked graves. And I showed you last time some of the graves, pretty much most of the gravestones that were marking the graves that are marked. And since that time, I've acquired a spreadsheet of the individuals buried there in the pioneer section of Evergreen Cemetery. And in a future Walkumentary, I will take you once again through there and talk a little bit about some of the people buried down there. But today, what I'd like to show you is another older section of the cemetery just up the hill from the pioneer section. And that's in this area up here, extending through those trees in the distance. I'm guessing that this section was the second section that the cemetery used to bury members of the Colorado Springs community back in the late 1800s. As you'll see in some of the gravestones here, the dates on those. And it's right across the street from one of the newer sections here. As you can see, they're preparing to place someone else in the ground. There's the modern way of digging a grave site, and you can see a couple of shovels also that will be used, and that's in the newer section of the cemetery. But here, back here, as I said, just up the hill from the pioneer section of the cemetery, which is over there, is a newer section of the cemetery, newer than the pioneer section, but still older as far as the cemetery goes. And you can see here, here's someone, Holbrook, that died in, looks like 1873. Colorado Springs was founded in 1871 and the 1872 time frame, so this individual died right after the city was founded. You see some of the older stonework around here. And I'll step down here and take a look at some of the gravestones. Speaking of older, I just said the word older. Here's somebody with the last name of Older. And let's see what they've got a date on here. Ebson B. Older. Born August 2nd, 1820. Died April 7th, 1884. So a little bit more than 10 years after Colorado Springs was formed as a city. So this area, this whole area here, as you can see, it's got some older stones. Newer than the pioneer stones, though, but older than most of the rest of the cemetery stones. I'm just going to kind of walk around, and here's one. Died 1877, aged 18 years, 26 days. I found out from my last Walkumentary, when I was talking about the pioneer section, from an individual who's been studying the times back then, that I was talking about many of the children that died. You saw, if you look at the last Walkumentary I did of the pioneer section, you saw that I found the gravestones of many children. And also when I looked at the spreadsheet of the individuals buried there, there are many children in the unmarked graves out here. And there were many epidemics that happened during the winter months and things. And the person I talked with said that probably many of the children died of different epidemics that were striking the area at that time. Okay, here's another footstone and a headstone here. And this individual died A.R. Garver died May 23rd, 1879. So not too long after Colorado Springs. So probably not too long after they arrived here in Colorado Springs. Age 28 years, 27 days. So this person wasn't here in Colorado Springs very long before they died. And remember, many people came here to Colorado Springs who suffered from tuberculosis. So an older person, maybe they suffered from tuberculosis and came here to be cured, but the cure, they weren't cured and they died here. Or you know, everybody has a story. There's a story for everybody. Here's an individual, an older gravestone here, 1888, underneath a tree. One of many trees here in Evergreen Cemetery. Some of the older stone fixtures in this older section of the cemetery, as you can see. Interesting, I was walking around earlier and I found a grave from 1866 in an area I didn't expect it. I'm thinking possibly that person was buried there. Now, the original cemetery in Colorado Springs was located, and if you're from Colorado Springs, you know where the old Chrissy Fowler lumber area was, by the Giuseppe's railroad depot. That was the original, and here you see there's a couple of footstones here and some headstones. Actually, it looks like a family, the Eli family, and it looks like one headstone and the rest are footstones from where the families are buried. But as I was saying, the old cemetery, the original city cemetery, was located near where the Chrissy Fowler Lumber Company is, right next to the railroad tracks, right next to the original train depot here. When people would come to Colorado Springs by train, they would get off at that train depot. And the original city cemetery was located just south of that train depot. As you can imagine, as more and more people died of tuberculosis here, some were cured, some died, or died of other ailments, or natural causes. As more and more people died in Colorado Springs, that city cemetery that was back then was starting to fill up. And imagine getting off the train in Colorado Springs and the first thing you see are a mass of graves. Well, that wasn't very good for the city PR, so General William Jackson Palmer, the founder of Colorado Springs, donated all this land. I mean, you can't even see all this land. This cemetery is massive, acres and acres and acres. He dedicated all this land, had those people dug up from the original city cemetery and buried here in Evergreen. And I'm guessing that probably some of those people that were buried out there, possibly in the older graves, like that 1866 grave, I can't imagine where that individual came from when the city was not here, if they re-entombed that person or what, but I'm guessing. Maybe I'll take a walk over there and I'll show you that grave. Here is a tombstone that's missing, and the footstone is still there. Let's see, what do we have here? This individual died in 1880, buried at this time. There was probably, when they were buried here, there probably was no tree. I doubt this tree was here in 1880, so this tree was planted or sprung up after the person was buried. Here's a person that died in 1879. Elizabeth Spencer, 1879. So you can see, this is one of the older sections of the cemetery. Borders one of the newer sections. More gravestones from the 1880s here. 1882, and some newer ones here. And we'll come over here. Okay, these are newer graves here. It's probably family plots. Or some areas where some graves in this older section, like here. Here's somebody who was buried here in 2003. So the family either bought this plot a long time ago, or it was one that was never purchased a long time ago. 1879. Another 1879. John Hastings, 1852 to 1879. And here is a Glass family plot. Some more 1800, 1879, 1882, 1898. So you see, it's right around that same time frame when these people were buried here at Evergreen Cemetery. Now, if you look over here, this area over here, when I was a member of the Evergreen Cemetery Benevolent Society, we maintained some of the older tombstones here, and we worked in restoring this area over here. You can see the walls have been fixed up and some of the gravestones put back together, things like this. So this is the area that I also worked in when I was a member of the Evergreen Cemetery Benevolent Society. So what I'm going to do is take you over there, because there's kind of an interesting story. We researched a lot of the people over in this area here to see if we could read about their past, and quite a few of them we did were able to find and talked about during our different tours and things. And let's see, here's a fallen stone over here. 1876. Person died in 1876. And see, if we were working in this area here, you can see probably why the tombstone fell as it did. You can see it fell in a direction that the land is sloped. And that's one problem. The land is sloped a lot over here, real hilly. So the tombstones, the gravestones, once the land slopes so much, earth moves, and then the stones will topple. So I'm guessing eventually somebody from that society will take care of this area also. It's a big cemetery, and there's a lot of work to be done in this area. So let's walk on over to the area where I worked on some of the grave sites, and I'll begin my walkumentary once I get over there. Okay, wanted to stop here real quick. On my way over to the area where I was talking about, where the Evergreen Cemetery Benevolent Society was working on some of the older tombstones, wanted to show you here. If any of you are familiar with the history of Cripple Creek, Colorado, and the gold mining that was done there, you probably heard about Cripple Creek, Colorado. Mr. Womack is buried here, and he was the one designated as the person who discovered gold that started the gold rush in Cripple Creek, Colorado. And here his grave is right here, Womack. And if you read about the history of Cripple Creek, you no doubtly read about Mr. Womack. And he died here and is buried here in 1909. And this symbol here marks a Evergreen Cemetery historic marker. That means that this person was part of the history of the area. You'll see these markers all around the cemetery here. But this is Mr. Womack's grave here. And actually some of the other Womacks are buried here too. Okay, let's go on over here. And as we walk, I'll just kind of pan some of the older gravestones in this older section of Evergreen Cemetery. You can see the sandstone. I guess it's sandstone. It kind of rubs off. All you can read there, memory of, and then the rest is gone. But some of these huge stones mark some of the graves around here. As you can see, many of the older stones are in disrepair and in need of care, but there's just so many stones here. Like I told you, there's probably 90,000 people buried here at the cemetery. Many more in the newer section, but many in the older section, and that's where the repairs are needed. You can see that this was not professionally done, but somebody, probably from the family or something, glued this stone back together. We actually went to a class and learned how to restore, a restoration class, and learned how to properly restore gravestones, which was pretty interesting. Okay, here's some of the, as you can see, some of the older broken tombstones. Here's one, 1879. Samuel Arnold, Diana, 1879. This is block 37 here, the cemetery. Just kind of gives you a feeling of what this older section is like. As in the Pioneer section, probably Not many relatives still living for these people. They may all be buried here at Evergreen Cemetery, so not too many people come visit, except, the friends of Evergreen, things like this. A lot of these recessed stone you won't see anywhere else in the cemetery. It was just in this older cemetery that they did this kind of interment. I'll go down there in a second, but this one, if it was this stone right here, when we were working in this area here, we looked at this stone to see whose it was. And Squire, son, and I forget the son's name, but it's on the other side. And when he died, it actually said he died in the town of Edgerton, Colorado. And it was funny because none of us on the society knew where Edgerton, Colorado was. So I took it upon myself to research and found out that Edgerton, Colorado was an old town in Colorado where the Air Force Academy is now located. Small town, near a creek, near a lake. And in Edgerton, what they mostly, their product was ice. And I believe the lake is still called Ice Lake. They would cut up blocks of ice that would freeze up there, and there was a rail cars that would come up, and they would load the ice on the rail cars and ship it out of Edgerton, Colorado. And I went over there to Edgerton, and actually I probably should do a walkumentary there one day, but there's nothing left. And I did some research and found some information about Edgerton, but not much. But that's where this individual, Mr. Squire, was buried, or died. I'm sorry, he died, and he was from Edgerton, Colorado, and where it's now right on the Air Force Academy. But there's no more signs of the town. So I did a little story on that, looked up that. It was pretty interesting. As you can see, there's many, many, many old stones here, many in disarray. But many of them, some of the stones you see standing were not standing prior to the society actually coming in and working on the stones and restoring them. It may not look like there was a lot done, but trust me, this area, you would not believe, this area you couldn't even see most of these stones before that. The area was grown over, and it was a mess. So many of the stones we had to search for and find, and as they started redoing the walls, rebuilding the walls. This wall right here was rebuilt, I believe, by some one of the Boy Scout troops that helped us out, and they did some of the other stones in the area. So it's pretty interesting. So I'll just kind of walk and show you these some of these older stones here. 1884. You can see some of these stones are so heavy you're going to need machinery to actually put them on their foundations again, because they're just so massive. I mean, it may not look heavy, but trust me, it is heavy. That stone I was showing you with Mr. Squire from Edgerton, Colorado, it took two of us just to get that, just to stand that stone up. And it didn't look like a very heavy stone, but these babies, they are heavy. Now, could you imagine trying to get this stone here up on that pedestal and put Fanny's stone back on? Which first, what would have to happen? You'd have to level, because you can see why it probably fell is because this ground is sloped, and the sloping made the stone fall. So you'd have to level and there's a way to do it. They have classes on that. I believe that the Benevolent Society has a tape that shows you how to do it, how to properly level the foundation and then put the stone. But you would need some machinery to put this one back in place. You don't want it would take, you would hurt yourself if you tried otherwise. Okay, this here, Drake. Here's some more. Looks like infantry or cavalry soldiers. Over here, Drake. In town here, there's, I believe, the Drake Power Plant. That's where Martin Drake, the Martin Drake Power Plant. That's where Martin Drake is buried right there. I guess he was one of the pioneers of Colorado Springs. Power plant named after him. He may have founded the power plant. I don't know. I'm not sure. I really don't know the history of Mr. Drake, but that's his grave right there in the older section here of the cemetery. Okay, we'll walk over here. You can see some of the broken stones, some of the broken walls. You got to be careful when you're walking on here. There's many holes and things. So you see how much disarray this old foundation is, and you can see the stone tipping to the right. The land is sloping. This person died. W.W. Jerome died in 1881. Let's kind of look back where we just were. Here's a headstone that's missing. I have no idea where it's at. The footstone was down here. So you can see the grave is sloped, this land is sloped. So there's the footstone leading up to where the headstone would be, but the base is all that's left of this grave. So you'd have to look at cemetery records to see who's buried here. And I'm sure, as just like in the Pioneer section, there's probably many unmarked graves here also. Stones missing or just never put here. So this person died in 1885. Over here's a kind of an unusual markings. It looks like they used to have cabling or something going across these pillars of this stone. So you can see some of the older walls here and the new cemetery section there in the distance, but the older rock walls of the old cemetery section. And just to the south here is the Pioneers area where many, right there, just in this picture right here, you're probably looking at, I would imagine, probably 500 to 600 people buried, and maybe just a few markers, as you can see. That's it. Most of them unmarked graves, and that's the Pioneer section I did in the previous walkumentary I did for you. But like I said, here these pillars here, they probably, I'm guessing, held. As you can see, there was something up there, maybe in here that's worn away, maybe some kind of cabling rope or something that went through here. Some of the old stones. This one isn't pretty much. This one looks like it toppled and broke, as you can see, broken in many pieces. Arthur J. Brody died in 1852. It's funny what we found at this gravesite when we lifted one of the stones, and we put it back into the ground there for them. An old piece of jewelry that somebody either had left there or was, that is kind of interesting. But we put it back, buried it back into this area here, probably a couple years ago. It's always, some people, it's not a good idea to take things from a graveyard, okay? You take things from a graveyard that aren't yours, and you don't know what you're taking, and you don't know what might follow you. So I have seen people pick things up and take them with them, but you know what? You should just leave things alone. If you see something that looks out of place, maybe dig a little hole and put it there under the ground with the person, because somebody brought it there for that person who's in that grave. They didn't bring it there for you to take. And I've heard stories of people that have taken things from graveyards that, it's bad karma. You'll be haunted or something. So, mark my words, leave things at the graveyard alone. They were put there not for you, but for someone else who's in the ground. Okay, some more of the old stones. And you can see the old pine trees. They're pretty high. Down here is a couple of, I think at least one we found when we were digging around. Yeah, there's one. An old. Now here you can see there's probably been more here. You can see some kind of rock formation there. And I have a feeling there's more than just one grave here, but there's only one gravestone that we found. And it's pretty much worn away. You can't really see who it is or when they died. And some bricks, and I'm thinking it looks like there's another grave here based on the brick foundation here, some of the base. So I'm thinking there's probably numerous graves right around in here that are unmarked. And here's, you see there's another stone and something here. Probably grave cemetery records would have to tell us who is here. And I'm sure the Benevolent Society is someday going to maybe track all that down. Okay, now we're going to go back up here to pretty much where we just came from, but you haven't seen these old gravestones yet. Willie White. Here's Willie White. Willie White is asleep in Jesus, it says. And he's also got, you can see the stone masonry and stone walls here. And let's see if Willie White's got a date of death back here. Yes, Willie White died January 26, 1888. Age 10 years. Oh, it's a child. 10 years. 20 days. 9 months, 20 days. So almost 11 years old. So Willie White was a child. If you can hear the train in the distance. Remember what I told you earlier about the train depot being near the original graveyard? So that train whistle you hear, that passed right by the where the old cemetery was. That train whistle you hear you just heard in the background. And some more gravestones and footstones. And I believe these may be either the sisters or the mother or something. There was some kind of tragedy where they found, we were researching these stones here, the people who were in these graves, and I think we found that the mother was deceased and the two little girls, little babies, and they died. And so we don't know, it was kind of suspicious, but we weren't sure. We couldn't confirm that it was possibly one, maybe like a what we call a murder-suicide nowadays, but I believe I think the dates were wrong or something for that, but I can't remember exactly, but there was some suspicious circumstances in the deaths of these people right here. I'd have to go back and look. I think there was one baby that drowned and something else, and then the mother died, so it's like, I think it's two girls, or a little boy, a little girl, and the mother or something. Let me see. Oh yeah, William Wallace. Okay, so that'd be the brother. Like I said, I cannot remember. We did look it up, but I cannot remember exact on that one. But you can see that these also have these cornerstones that look like they either held some kind of a rope or cable or something. And some more people buried here died 1880 and 1888. Grimes family burial ground here. And here's another one. It's kind of worn away. I think there are a lot of people who enjoy going to the older cemeteries. I've been to 18 different cemeteries. This is just one of them, and I've got mostly still pictures of the other ones. And maybe in the future I'll go to some more and do some walkumentaries about those too. Okay, one more thing I wanted to show you, and I believe it's over here, is that stone I was telling you about that was from 1866. It was kind of out of place because it was placed here, and I was trying to figure out, when did they rebury this person? It just comes some kind of... Now we're walking to the newer section, but there's still some pretty old graves here, and this is kind of interesting. This one I'm walking up to here. Oh, look at that. There's a crow or some kind of bird over there on the cross, right where I'm going to be going. So there he goes, he's flying away. But remember I told you about those massive stones that were laying down. Now look at this one. This is one of the older graves from the early 1800s, or late 1800s, I'm sorry. But look at the size of this thing. And I'm sure it was never meant to stand up. It probably always lay down, but it looks like it shifted some of the rocks underneath. It looks like they've sunken into the ground. Somebody's wife, Suzanne, or is it what? Susanna Judge, wife of Frank Wood? I can't read that. Died 1888. There you go. And David Russ Wood died 1880, right there. But see that, it's one heck of a massive stone. Some more older graves here. It's kind of mixed, mingled mixed, but over here is where I wanted to show you, mixed in some of the newer graves, the older graves, is a stone that was from, I believe, 1866. A few years before Colorado Springs was founded. So that person either was brought across or reburied or something. It was a baby. Here's the stones. next to each other. You see it says baby. And if you go around the other side, you'll see infant child, died 1866. See that? There's 1866. Now remember, Colorado Springs was formed in 1872, 1871, 1872 time frame, when they really started building up. So that's from Rankin, last name Rankin. Another one, Rankin. Here's one that was born in 1863, died 1872, just right after Colorado Springs was formed. Son of J.D. and LaGuinda Rankin. So these are Rankin children here. Okay, well, hope you enjoyed my little walkumentary around one of the older sections of Evergreen Cemetery. And I'm sure I'll be doing some more. So thanks for visiting. Have a great day. Bye-bye.